All right, I think we're live. Hey everyone, thanks for coming out today, logging on to Facebook to come see us. My name's Tyler Henderson, and this is Brandon Checketts, the founder of Seller Labs. So today we're going to be talking about sponsored product ads and all types of different types of ad buying on Amazon. So Brandon, do you want to give us a quick little intro about kind of what you think we're going to talk about today, and then we can kind of get into the nitty gritty while people still sign on?
Sure thing. Thanks for joining us, everybody. We're happy to have you here again. We're trying to make a pretty regular thing out of this. We're happy to share our knowledge about Amazon advertising. We've got a lot of stuff going on in this space if you paid attention over the last little bit. So today we want to touch on a few things just to make sure everybody's on the same page as we talk about advertising on Amazon. There's a lot of different options for advertising on Amazon, and that can be kind of confusing. So we want to make sure we touch on all the different advertising placements, sort of how Amazon thinks about advertising. Jeff and I were up in Seattle last week, and we got had some great conversations, seminar type of stuff with some folks at Amazon while we were there, and want to try and share some of that knowledge and disseminate that. So we just kind of want to jump right in and get to it and talk about all this sort of advertising stuff, what you can and cannot do, and how to make sure that you have all the opportunities that are available to you.
Right, because there were some recent changes that have come out for sellers. Hi, Christine, and hi, everyone else. There's some recent changes that have come down for third-party sellers, particularly recently, right, Brandon? And we talked about it a little bit last week, but tell me a little bit about those.
Yeah, so the recent thing is the Amazon headline search ads have been historically only available to vendors and vendor express sellers who are selling, or brands who are selling to Amazon through vendors, through the vendor express programs. And that became available to sellers. I think a week or two ago, they started rolling it out, and it's more generally available to all sellers now. Again, that's to sellers who are brand registered and have brought products that are properly brand registered. But the trend that we're seeing from Amazon is they don't really care if you're a vendor on the 1P side or a seller on the 3P side. They're essentially working towards making sure that these ad placements are available regardless of how you're interacting and what your relationship with Amazon is. So all the advertising stuff that we're seeing, we've seen a lot of work from their teams in the last over the last year or two, and that's really starting to materialize more recently, that they're really trying to get parity between the platforms for brand owners. So it doesn't really matter if you're a vendor or a seller. You can really take advantage of all that Amazon has to offer.
Yeah, so just to that regards, I know that there's a couple different types of ads that you can buy on Amazon. And like you said, traditionally they were siloed in between Seller Central and Vendor Central. So can you touch briefly on the three different types of ads that you can have, and which ones traditionally were Seller Central, which ones were traditionally Vendor Central?
Sure. I want to walk through the three different. I want to walk through it a little bit of how Amazon thinks about advertising. And so Amazon thinks about advertising in this terms, and this is a well-taught term in marketing things or marketing schools of whatever. It's about the buyer purchase funnel. And I think we've got a graphic of it. There we go. I found this one online a little while ago. So starting at the very, very top of the funnel, customers are not aware of anything, maybe not even aware that they need something. There's this broad concept of the awareness phase, where they go through that. After they're sort of aware of a need, they may consider a purchase, and maybe they price shop during this thing. Maybe they shop for different features. Maybe they're just sort of they're considering different options that they have with that. And then the buyer will go into sort of a decision phase. They've considered all their options. They've decided one of the ones they want to buy. They have a very high purchase intent at this phase. And then they actually go buy something. And then later on in that, marketing class, we talk about retention and advocacy, and we've got some tools that will help with that. But this is sort of how Amazon thinks about advertising, is this awareness, consideration, and purchase intent sort of phases. And they have three different ad placements that are available on the Amazon site that help you sort of with those three that are intended for those three different phases. And it's important to note, not every buyer goes through this entire sort of conscious decision. When you're making a high consideration purchase, things like that are typically more expensive, that you do a lot of research on, you tend to go more slowly or more consciously through these choices. Where a lot of impulse decisions, there's no awareness and consideration. It's just a quick ad or advertisement or a need that you know about, and you'll go right to the purchase intent phase. This is sort of how Amazon thinks about it, and so we want to sort of make sure that customers and sellers and vendors are aware of how Amazon thinks about that. So we're all sort of talking about the same page. So along these lines, the first sort of advertising type that Amazon likes to talk about is the headline search ads. Now, as a seller, this is a relatively new thing, but it's been available to vendors for a long time. And so I think Tyler's got a specific page pulled up here. This is an example I use all the time for soda because there's almost always somebody advertising on this. So if you just go to Amazon and you search for soda, you can see this top advertisement up here for Pepsi. This is what Amazon calls a headline search ad. Historically, they've called it the sparkle ad too. You might see it referred to historically.
Yeah.
But that's sort of the top advertising placement that they have.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you scroll down a little bit, you'll see some sponsored product ads. I think that first one or two on this particular page are sponsored product ads. So those sort of look like they're in the, these are a different kind of advertising placement and platform within Amazon as the sponsored product ones. Most of our sellers are very well aware of these because sponsored products historically started with sellers and it's been available for sellers for quite some time.
Right.
But these have really prominent placement. You'll notice they look just like search results. And so an uneducated buyer might not even know that that's a sponsored post.
So that's the section where you're trying to take users to conversion, correct? So
yeah,
sponsored products with purchase intent.
Yeah, Amazon's intent with these particular ads are that they're targeted towards customers that they know are likely to buy. They're more ready to buy, so they're looking at specific products there.
Right.
So you can see some examples there of the top two placements. Show the first two what would look like organic search positions are sponsored products, and then on the far right side there's another bar of I think 4 placements over there on the right side. And then also, if you scroll all the way down to the search results page, you can see the bottom, I think 4 or 5 in this result are also sponsored product placements. So they kind of sprinkle those sponsored product placements throughout, and they get pretty prominent position. I also wanted to point out on the mobile app and on the mobile website and the mobile app, they have these these are positioned differently there as well. So here's an example of a screenshot I took of the mobile website, and you can see on this particular example, this is again a search for soda. It's a little bit small to tell in the picture there, but the top headline search ad right there is again for Pepsi, and there's actually not any sponsored product placements on this one. So Amazon's got some secret algorithms that they figure out when it's appropriate to show headline search versus sponsored products. That's kind of one of the reasons why we just want everybody to be educated about all these options that are out there, because in some cases, ads show in different places on the different platforms.
Totally, and I think that's a great point. There's just so many options out there for sellers to take advantage of that a lot of the time people kind of get lost in the confusion of what's the best thing for me to use right now. What's the best thing where's the best place to spend my money? And so before we kind of keep moving forward, I want to say, again, hello to everyone who's just tuning in now. I want to say we're doing a giveaway today. So when we reach 25 shares, we're going to be sending out a sweet tumbler, Seller Labs tumbler that's like really awesome. It's like one of those Yeti or stainless steel tumblers that like keeps it cold for super cold for hours. So when we reach 25, we're going to be giving away 1. When we reach 50 shares, we're going to be giving away 3. So go ahead and hit that share button if you're interested. We think that we're providing some great information today. So that's that. So Brandon, people say to me all the time, and say to you all the time, when we're talking to customers, which one should I use? And we talked about the funnel, but what are other things that we need to keep in mind when we're making ad purchases?
Well, I want to talk about one other placement that doesn't get a lot of love right now because it's only available to vendors. But if you go, Tyler, if you search for Apple Slicer on Amazon, I found an example of this earlier.
Yeah, I think we've got that in the slide, correct?
Yeah, I don't know if I've got a slide for it. Well, I'll touch on in the slides. There's a couple extra placements that you might not be aware of for sponsored products. So everybody's aware of them sort of on the search results page. That's kind of the main visibility they get. Mm-hmm. They're also very prominent on product detail pages. So just below the bullet points and just below the fold, as soon as you scroll up, you start to see sponsored product placements there. those two placements, everybody I think is aware of those.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also some sponsored product placements that have started to show up in a couple of extra places. One of them is this add to cart page.
Yeah.
If you add something to your cart, you'll start to see sponsored products that are related to the product that you sold or that you just bought. And then similarly, the next one that we have there is on the thank you page. As soon as you buy something, on the page that says your order's complete and being processed, there's also sponsored product placements on there as well. So they're just there's a whole bunch of different placements that they have.
Great. And so you said there was one more on the search page for if I searched Apple Slicer.
Yeah, I want you to go search for Apple Slicer and then click
right.
on the top organic result for that. So we're making this one up as we go, but I saw this, it was there just a little bit ago, an hour ago or so. So Apple Slicer is another really good example. We use this in a lot of our examples. Again, It's got a headline search ad here at the top with the Apple Slicers. Click on that third one, the PrepWorks. I think there's one called PrepWorks. I think it's down a little bit farther. There you go. It's the middle one on the second row.
Okay, click on this guy.
Yeah, I know this one had some other ads on it too. So there's another ad placement called product display ads. This one's only currently available to vendors, but we expect that it'll be made available to sellers as Amazon's sort of working towards parity on all these. So if you scroll down just a little bit, you'll see on the right side underneath those add to cart boxes, there's an ad right there for a fruit infuser is what it is. Yeah. So that's a placement called product display ads. And oftentimes in that same spot where there's one for the Chef'n Simply Strip, whatever that is, that's another product display ad that appear in those two placements. And so the intent of these two placements is really for customers that are in that consideration phase where they might be price shopping, they might be comparing different products. And so those are placements that you can get. Again, that's only available to vendors right now, but we expect that'll be made available to sellers at some point in the near future as Amazon's rolling out the parity between everybody.
So let's kind of take it back to our example of the funnel then for a second. So awareness, that would be the headline display ads, correct?
Yeah, so Amazon's intent with the headline search ads is kind of to be very, very top of mind. As soon as you search something, it's the very top thing on the page, like helping you bring awareness to your brand.
Okay, and then consideration, that's the product display ad?
Sure, that's the product display ads. So you're sort of in that phase, sort of price shopping or feature shopping between different products. And so those ads are prominently displayed on the product detail pages where you might be comparing different products or looking for products that complement something you're buying.
And then when we're finally to the decision point, or we skip right to the decision point, that would be the sponsored product ads.
Yeah, and the sponsored product ads kind of fit all phases of that really, because they're kind of all throughout in all those pages. But specifically when the buyer is ready to make a decision, there's a high likelihood that they're going to click on one of those ads, and the placements are for that reason.
So we have a great question here from Christine. I'm going to go ahead and throw it up here. 1 second. We will take that off, and let's answer Christine's question. Christine says, so the sponsored products ads you're showing, are those created through AMS, or are those essentially the sponsored products in Seller Central?
Yeah, so that's a really good question, and I think so you can do it through both is the answer. So Tyler, do you want to flip over to that other slide I made that sort of talks about where these are available to people at right now?
Yes.
This is where it gets a little confusing because we know there's the 3 ad placements, and they historically have been available at different places, but this is kind of the current state of things as they are right now. So sponsored product ads specifically, those that are in the search results, those that are on the product detail pages, those things that are all called sponsored products, they're available whether you're a seller through Seller Central or whether you're a vendor through AMS. So they're available to both types of both of those relationships with Amazon, regardless of how it is. The interface is slightly different between the two. The exact mechanics behind it are just slightly different, but the ad placements end up being on the same place. You're bidding against people, and when you're bidding on one platform, you're bidding against people on both platforms and all that kind of stuff. So sponsored products specifically are available to both vendors and sellers. And then the headline search part, which has historically only been available to vendors, about 2 weeks ago, they started rolling that out for sellers as well. So That headline search placement, the one at the very top of search results, is available to both vendors and sellers now. On the seller side, there's some limitations, and so you do have to be properly brand registered for your brand. Your items have to be part of that brand. So there's a few limitations around it on the vendors on the 3P side. I just noticed our slide there says 1P where it should say 3P. So
yeah, I noticed that a second ago.
It's corrected now. Yeah, so those are available to both vendors and sellers now. And then product display ads, that last one I showed you where it had like the product below, the advertisement below the buy box, below the bullet points, that one's still only available to vendors. It works over there, but not available to sellers. But we do expect, sometime in the future, Amazon will make that available to sellers as well, just because they're trying to make all these things available to everybody.
Yeah, that's great. So you project that in the next, in the foreseeable future, in the next year or however long, these things take time with Amazon, but you expect that there will be much more parity between the offering for sellers, third-party sellers, and vendors.
Yeah, I think the way that we've seen this pattern from Amazon over the last year and a half or so is they're essentially moving towards, it doesn't matter if you're a vendor or a seller, you'll have access to the same advertising tools. And so we've seen them roll out sponsored products. Was started with sellers, it became available for vendors. Headline search was exclusive to vendors, it's now available to sellers, and we expect product display ads will be there soon. I don't know if that's tomorrow or next year, but it's probably coming. So
yeah, with Amazon, there's no way to really tell with that. So Christine asks again, another great question from Christine. And if other people have questions, I'd encourage you to chime in. We'd be happy to field them. Christine asks, is there an upside to doing sponsored products through AMS versus sponsored products through Seller Central? I'm assuming both might be good, but I'm concerned I'd be bidding against myself.
So Christine, that's a really good question. So you definitely don't want to do it on both of them simultaneously with the same keywords, because you would be bidding against yourself. You'll notice with headline search ads, there's exactly one placement. Like with sponsored products, there's 15 placements on the page, but with headline search, there's only one. The top one wins. And so you definitely don't want to be bidding on the same keywords on both AMS and through Seller Central, because you're bidding against yourself. Amazon doesn't know you're the same person in those two cases. As far as maybe choosing one or the other, there's different advantages to each one right now. So the advantage that I would say on the AMS side is that you can advertise any product regardless of whether you're properly registered for it and you have all the brand registry done properly. You can advertise on through AMS as a vendor. You can advertise any of your products regardless of if they're properly set up with the brand registry. The other advantage about the headline search through AMS is it's got a little bit better interface as far as the bid estimates, a little bit more data there. And if you have existing campaigns there, maybe not necessarily a huge reason to move it over yet. On the seller side, and now the same headline search ads that are available on the sellers, the reporting is actually a little bit better, or actually a fair amount better on the Seller Central side. It's built on their newer platform, which has, you can do stuff by day, and there's a lot better reporting availability on the seller side for headline search ads. So again, Amazon's working on both platforms to make them the same in parity, but it just depends on where you're at and what you're looking for. So I would say right now, if you're properly brand registered and everything's set up like that, sponsored products through Seller Central is probably the way to go. So if you're properly set up, then the AMS side works as well too.
So kind of follow-up question to that, Brandon. If I'm running for one product or group of products, my brand, do I want to be using the same keywords or search terms for all three of the types of ads? Or
yeah, that's a great question. So, and then this is one where we can go quite deep on it. I see a few comments coming through too about people commenting that headline search ads are kind of a waste of money. They've seen them as expensive. They haven't performed as well. And one of the things that I'd just like to touch on with that is the entire platform for headline search ad is very different than sponsored products. So you'll notice the headline search ad actually has 3 products are required for it. Mm-hmm. It also lands you, if you click on the banner without clicking on one of the specific product, it lands you on another page that has your products listed that you're advertised. And so the experience is a little bit different. So some people do see worse performance on that. The other thing from a technical side as well is like the headline search ads do not have a concept of negative search terms. And so without being able to have that refinement, you can actually spend quite a bit of money on search terms that don't matter. Because that's, I think, one of the main reasons why people think it's a little bit wasteful or more expensive on the headline search ads is because if you start on sponsored products, we're used to teaching people to start with broad match terms and refine them down. And if you do that on the headline search ads, you essentially can't refine it down any because you don't get reports and you don't get negative keywords. So on headline search, my recommendation is to work kind of opposite. Take what you know, the exact match or maybe the phrase match terms that you know work and convert really well on sponsored products, right? And make those into headline search ads rather than going the opposite way because you won't have the ability to save the money and to set those negatives.
Yeah, I think that's a really great tip because, like you're saying, Amazon, especially when you're using broad match. Amazon just wants clicks and wants impressions from you, right? Because that means they make more money. So they're not going to be as discerning as you might want them to be.
Yeah, and you'll see like their intent with that is more towards the awareness phase, and so their reporting stuff is more focused on just how many impressions and how many clicks did I get, and not as detailed and down to the conversion level and everything as sponsored product is, because they've historically thought of it as a impression awareness type of thing where brands like Coke and Pepsi are willing to just spend money on that advertising placement just to make sure their brand gets recognized.
So, and I think that, we were having a discussion before this and you said that you can already see that in the reporting that Amazon gives you, the different types of search or the different stages of the funnel. And that you expect that to be even more built out and more emphasized in the future, right?
Yeah. I think that we'll start to see more like that sort of funnel we talked about with headline search at the top. We'll start to see more metrics around like what that intent behind awareness. We'll start to see more, share of voice type of things, like how often is my stuff displayed versus my competitors. Some of that kind of stuff will come down the road. I think it's not there yet. I think we're talking 6 months to a year out still. But that's the direction we see it going, just to keep all of our users and all of our listeners aware. So
here's a great question from Matt. Matt says, "Is there any reporting on headline search ads? I've been running for a week and can only see all the money I'm spending."
That's a great observation, Matt. So I'm curious whether if you've been running it for a week, I'm assuming you're over on the Seller Central side, which does have a little bit better reporting. But it doesn't have like the user search terms you'd be used to with sponsored products. It's basically only got reporting on like how much money you spend each day in conversions. And so that's one of the reasons, and we'd actually like to get you hooked up on our Ignite. So one of the software tool that we build, and the reason we're so knowledgeable about this is because we have a software tool called Ignite that helps users to manage all this kind of stuff. And the reporting from, especially from the headline search and the product display stuff from the AMS side has been really, really weak. And so Ignite is able to pull a lot of that kind of stuff down and generate better reports for you. So you can see what's working and what's not. You can see trends week over week and month over month and that kind of stuff inside of Ignite that's not available through Amazon at all. In a lot of cases, like you can't even get at the data because they just don't give you even Excel or CSVs or anything to get at the data. So.
Right, which I think is a great transition into talking about where Ignite's going with all this. But before we kind of do that, again, I want to say we're giving away some tumblers today, Seller Labs tumblers. So you can get your chance to win one of these and we'll mail it to you. All you have to do is hit the share button and share it to your friends and fellow sellers. But yeah, I think, Brandon, we have a slide, correct, on what Ignite's future is with this.
Yeah, so we've got another slide similar to the one where we shared like where all the advertisement placements are at from Amazon. This is what Ignite currently supports. So you can see on this sort of diagram that Ignite currently supports. It was made again for sellers on the sponsored product side. So we've been doing that for 6 months now. We've got lots of support and lots of cool features for that. And then all the AMS side, for the one piece side, we've got beta access to all those. So sponsored products, headline search, and product display ads. If you're interested in that, I don't know how best to do it here, Tyler. If they can just comment in the thing, or if they want to, what's the best way to have somebody express an interest in the 1P AMS side?
Yeah, just comment in the live comments what you're most interested in as far as that goes.
Yeah, so if you're interested in access to the AMS part, again, we're in beta for that right now. We've actually got a few hundred people already sort of signed up in the waiting list, but just put the word AMS inside your comment here, and we'll figure out how to get you on the invite beta list for that as we roll it out. So that's going pretty well. And then what we have coming on the Ignite is AMS. The new thing that Amazon launched is headline search ads for sellers. We're working pretty closely with Amazon on making that work. And so we expect that will be, it's mostly on their timeline. And so we expect to make that available in Ignite as soon as we have access to do it. And again, we're working pretty closely with Amazon on trying to make that happen as soon as possible. In fact, the moment that we saw it was released, I emailed our contacts over there that says, hey, we need API access and everything for that. So we're right on top of that as quickly as we can. So
definitely, and this is really exciting stuff. Being able to see all of this merge together. It was such disparate parts at first, and so being able to see this come together and right in time for Ignite is pretty exciting from our end, and being able to see sellers and be right there day one with sellers as they learn to use these are super exciting, and provide knowledge from the context that we have is super exciting for us as Seller Labs. Wouldn't you say, Brandon?
Yeah, it's I'm really excited about it. We identified it as a growing trend clear back in November, and so we're really happy to see we kind of predicted a lot of this, and so we started our software development. So we're right smack in the middle of it. We're really excited to be able to share with our audience all the stuff that we learn about it, and also build a lot of what we learn from Amazon, from our sellers, from our own experiences. We're building all that into our software tools to make them pretty awesome. In fact, I guess it was yesterday, went to production some of our automated suggestions for sellers. So if you have a sponsored product campaign, our software has got algorithms built around it that help you adjust your bids, to add new keywords, to adjust the targeting, to put negative keywords. We've had suggestions in there for a little while and gotten some great feedback about those. And we've just added the ability to make those automatic and make them apply automatically as well. So if you have any needs on the sponsored product side for automating and trying to make your process for managing sponsored products more efficient, definitely check out Ignite, because we just released some really cool stuff with that.
So here's a great question from Ray. He says, we're finding on headlines that we're having difficulty getting impressions on some keywords that are best converting keywords. Any thoughts? Our bids are high.
Excellent. So this is a really good question, and this is probably one of the most frequently asked questions that I see as I'm talking with sellers, if I'm observing Facebook groups and all that kind of stuff. Is my bid is high, but I'm still not getting the impressions that I want or the placements that I want. I'm not converting very well. And so one thing that is critical, super critical to understand about all this is that Amazon bid is not, your bid is not the only thing that goes into consideration when figuring out what ad to show where. Amazon always wants to have a good customer experience above all else, above them making more money, essentially. And so I tend to go to the extreme example of if you're selling a apple slicer our typical example here, if you're selling an apple slicer, if you bid on the term water bottle, which has nothing at all to do with an apple slicer, Amazon's not going to give you probably any impressions at all, because it's just not relevant to the search term that the user entered. So Amazon's wise enough to know that water bottle has nothing to do with your apple slicer. And even if you put that as keywords in there, Amazon's system either will reject it outright and never display an impression, or they'll display about 1,000 impressions until the data tells them that that's not a relevant search term. And so Amazon always is going to obey what's in the customer's best interest, sort of primarily. And you can't force that. You can't bid even $100 or $1,000 on some of those to make them appear for keywords that aren't relevant. So that's kind of the extreme example, right? If you're trying to bid on keywords that are not relevant at all, what happens is if we narrow that extreme example down to much more realistic numbers. So what I would go is what data metrics or what metrics does Amazon have that helps them understand if a keyword is relevant. They sort of understand the English language. They know some of that kind of stuff. But how do they decide whether product A or product B or product C is the best product to show for any particular keyword? And if you think about the metrics that Amazon has available, the two primary metrics that stand out in my mind are your click-through rate and your conversion rate. So if an ad is shown and people click on it, that's a good indication that it's relevant. And if they buy it and spend money on it, that's an even better indication to Amazon that it's relevant. And so as far as how Amazon has to determine relevancy, there's some formulaic English language stuff that can go on with that. But then when it comes down to like, okay, all of these products might be relevant, which are the most relevant, it essentially comes down to click-through rate and conversion rate are the primary metrics that I can think of. If I was Amazon and writing code for it, those are the main things that I would be able to figure out. Like those are the metrics that help me determine relevance. Does that make sense so far, Tyler?
Yeah, totally. And I think that that's something that we preach as a company frequently is just a point that you just hit. When Jeff and I are out talking to customers and we're doing Facebook Lives, is to have your listings optimized for conversion first, right? So even, obviously what keywords you're bidding on and all of that's super important. But then once someone lands on your listing, you want to be able to convert them. And if you're not converting them, like you said, even if you're bidding $1,000, whatever, Amazon's going to say, well, we like these other people more because they're creating a better customer experience, which is at the end of the day, the most important thing to Amazon. And I've shown that time and time again. So, having a listing that humans can read and will convert humans is like one of the big things there that sometimes people forget.
Yeah, so we started out with this extreme example of apple slicers and water bottles. Now, if you narrow that down a little bit more and say we're all talking about apple slicers now, and I'm selling an apple slicer and my competitors are selling an apple slicer, now how does Amazon determine which one is more relevant to the customer? It comes down to conversion rates. And to go kind of extreme on that example, let's say I have a conversion rate of 25% if somebody searches for apple slicer and buys it, and my competitor has a conversion rate of 5%. Right? So I have 5 times better conversion rate than them. Like that just basically means that my ad is going to get shown at the top of the page much easier than theirs, because my metrics, my conversion rate and everything has told Amazon that my product, my apple slicer, is more relevant to that search term. So my competitor might be able to try and bid 10 times more than me, and they're never going to get that placement because my conversion rate is so much better than theirs. And so again, that's sort of an extreme example within this window, but if we keep narrowing that down, essentially what it boils down to is if your competitors have a 12% conversion rate and you have a 5, like they're going to get the placements that you can't. And if the wider that discrepancy is, the harder it is to get up there. So the better conversion rate you can make your product all the time is going to help you rank better and get better placements essentially in advertising.
Awesome. We have a great question here about, how many on the AMS side or the headline ads specifically, AMS or Seller Central now, how many keywords do you suggest using per campaign? Is it better to get more impressions when you create the headline ads, or is it better to have only the strictly most relevant ones for conversion's sake?
So I would say what we see on the sponsored product side is kind of we can usually people find about a dozen to 20 sort of broad match terms to start out with, and then you kind of refine that as you go. So you might start out with 15 or 20 or 12 broad terms that describe your product well, but then after you've been running your campaign for a while and you've gathered a lot of data, then you might say, okay, this branches out to 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 keywords that are more exact and or more phrase and more exact match stuff. So it's hard to say there's a certain number of keywords that's optimal, but I would say in general, we find that most people probably start out with 12 to 20 good keywords that generally describe their product, start those out as broad, and then learn as you go, both making negative keywords on the ones that aren't effective and making phrase and exact match onto the exact search terms that are better. That works for sponsored products where you've got that breadth of data. With headline search, it's more complicated because you can't do that fine tuning and making negative suggestions and everything. So with headline search, I personally recommend a different strategy is take the data that and the exact and phrase match keywords that are really good converting for you on sponsored products, and move those, keep them as a phrase and exact match when you start your headline search campaign, so that you're starting with the most relevant stuff, and then keep on adding to that as you find more and more broad and phrase stuff that works for you. I hope that's a answer to a complicated question.
Yeah, I think that was a good answer there. Let me see here. Let's find another good question for us to answer. So this is one that's going to be, Jason, I see your question down here, and I don't think that we're going to be able to like give you a sufficient answer without digging into your specific question. Jason asks, I found keyword that scope shows relevant to my product, suggested bid or higher, but don't get any impressions at all. Can't figure out the problem. Jason, Brandon, can you give us any general tips to help Jason out? Obviously, we'd have to dig into it specifically, and like that's not really doable in this case, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to depend on every product. In general, there's going to be some vague answers that we give in the same thing, right? And that's make sure that your keywords, your title, and your bullet points all contain those sort of keywords that are the most important for you. So specifically, the first part of your title is super important for figuring out what it works. There's a lot of other things that go into this algorithm, and a lot of it has to do with organic search history. And so if your product, some of it, we see that often with new products, right? So you launched a brand new product, a brand new apple slicer, but you start advertising the term apple slicer and it's just not showing up. A lot of that just takes time for Amazon's system to learn that that actually is an apple slicer and that's a relevant term for it. So a lot of times it's, it's number one, make sure that your bullet points and your content on your listing matches what you have there. The second part of it is a lot of times it just takes a little bit more time for Amazon's algorithm to learn that.
Right.
And then the more complicated stuff is we can dig into some details. There's some more specific things we could talk about with enhanced brand content and a bunch of other stuff that might go into that. But that's kind of the general answer that's shareable to a wide audience, I guess.
Yeah, like I said, that's a very account specific that's kind of difficult to answer in this format. So sorry if that doesn't answer it fully for you there, Jason. We've got a great question from Matt here, and we touched on it a little bit earlier. But he says, can you share some metrics on which placement locations are most successful in terms of conversion?
So that's a really good question, but the problem is like we can't because Amazon gives us zero data as far as placement locations. And this is intentional, as I understand it from their side, is that they don't want sellers to think of it in terms of placements. They want you to think of it in terms of optimizing your conversion rate. So they specifically don't provide any placement data in the APIs, in the Seller Central, and the reports. You'll never see placement anywhere in any of those because they kind of don't want you to have it. What they would rather have you do is focus on conversion rate, and they say the better placements get better conversion rates. And so that's kind of hard to say like which are most successful. Now I know there's some industry people talk about, if you think about search results, I've seen Eric Heller from Marketplace Ignition, really smart guy, share statistics about that. He said, I'll probably misquote him, but it's a high percentage. I think he said 60-something% of people click on the first three things in search results. And that's probably not exactly the right number, but it's in the ballpark. Like the majority, more than don't click on one of those that first row of products. And
right, so, and just kind of like we were sharing earlier, when you're choosing the ad type that you want, like we were talking about, let me pull up our little graph again. I think it is important to look at where in the funnel you're aiming, right, Brandon? That's again like it's logical to think that the sponsored product ads, since that's what they're gutting for here for the decision and the purchase intent, would be better at converting.
Yeah.
But that's again, exactly there's no way to really tell.
Yeah. So maybe I just misunderstood that question. So if you talk in terms of like placement locations and in terms of these different ad availabilities, like sponsored products is generally going to have the highest conversion rate out of any of those because it is intended to be the most closest to the purchase decision. The headline search stuff does pretty well in conversion rate, but it's not intended so much for that purpose. And so sometimes the conversion rates there, we don't see them historically as good sometimes as sponsored products. Sometimes they're better. It just depends because it is a little bit better placement higher up the page. And then the product display ads have got a history of being kind of poor performing. But we know they've added an extra placement. They've added a second placement on the page. They've done a lot of stuff with product display ads in the recent past to help make those perform a little bit better. But I would say that's kind of the order as far as the three different ad placements. The headline search is probably in the middle. Sponsored product is probably the best conversion rates, and product display historically has not been the best. Has been the third of those.
So there's been quite a few questions in here, and just broadly, how do I make the most of Ignite, of using Ignite to optimize my ads?
Yeah, I got to finish up pretty quick, but that's a great one to end on, is talking about how to Ignite helps with all this. So if you've not used Ignite before, it's super cool to try because it's got a lot of good stuff built into it. So Ignite helps walk people through what we've sort of identified are best practices as far as like how to structure your campaigns, how to select the right products that go together, and to build out that structure of campaigns and ad groups and automatic and manual campaigns. We've got other videos that go into that in pretty good depth. But Ignite, number one, kind of helps out organizing your campaign in what we've identified as kind of the best practices, putting it together that way. The other cool thing about Ignite is that we've built quite a few algorithms around bid changes, keyword selection, negative keywords, all that kind of stuff. And so after your campaigns have been running for a little while, you'll start to see some suggestions in there that gather in all this data. And they'll start to say, hey, we noticed that there was 14 clicks with 0 conversions on it. This might be a candidate for a negative keyword because it doesn't seem to be working. Or it might say, hey, you've got 100 clicks on it, and we can do the math and figure out the conversion rate's this and your target's this, so this is what your bid should be. And so Ignite does a lot of those suggestions and math for you to help you do all that. And then it also does all that without having to download any reports or do anything in Excel. So if you're not an Excel guru and would rather just interact with stuff in a web app, like, it's much better for that sort of experience in our opinion. So that's awesome. The high level highlights, I think, from Ignite.
Yeah, and I think that just to that end, just like we've kind of done our best to bring you all the cutting edge information and all the best use practices and teach that with sponsored product ads, as more things become available to more people, we're working on bringing those into Ignite and then also bringing you the best information in the space about how to use those new features. And so we're going to keep doing that as things go on as well.
Yep.
So Brandon, I know that you have another meeting, so I appreciate your time today. I think that this was really good. If you guys have questions, you can reach out to support@Seller Labs. Those of you who typed AMS or some form of that in the chat, we'll be reaching out to you about getting you on the new beta for that. And then, we still haven't reached our 25 shares yet. So if you reach 25, you'll get one of these. We'll send out one of these to a lucky person. So thank you guys so much for attending today, and have a great Wednesday.
All right. Thanks, everybody.